Origin's 125A Light Fighter seeks to bring entry-level fighter performance to new players, and actually offers a number of advantages over some other fighters in this space. But does that go far enough to make it worth it? I'm Forrester, and in this video I review the Star Citizen ship, the 125A. Star Citizen is currently in alpha testing, with the 125A as one of the flyable ships. She's flown by a single solo pilot and is described as a starter ship and a light fighter. For those of you who've seen other ship reviews on this channel, you'll recognise the usual format for this video. It's split into 5 sections, starting with a ship tour, assessing combat performance, reviewing handling and visibility, looking at the operating costs before finally summarising. I've included timestamps in the video description to help navigate to each part of the review, and if you're one of the 80% of people watching who isn't yet subscribed to the channel, be sure to subscribe to be notified of future videos. Part 1. Ship Tour. And entry to the 125A is via a ramp with a button on the left hand or port side of the ship. This deploys a little set of steps which lead you up into the main body. Right at the front of the ship there's also a small door which includes housing for components, in this case the quantum drive. Entering into the ship and closing the ramp. At the front of the ship is the cockpit chair. And at the back there are 2 storage cupboards. The first is the cargo storage, and above that is direct access to some of the components. There's also a bed which is usable to either sit or lie down and log out in. And then right at the front of your 125A is the cockpit chair. Part 2. Combat Performance. Starting with how your 125A comes armed, you get as stock 2 gimbaled size 2 weapons. By default they're M4A laser cannons. The choice to go gimbal is probably sensible for new pilots, since they don't need you to be quite so precise. The damage output isn't the highest however, and critically, with stock components will overheat very quickly. As part of component upgrades to the 125A, swapping those size 2s for larger fixed size 3s had a tangible impact on the stopping power of this ship. Those weapons are augmented by 6 size 2 missiles, which is actually very reasonable for a small ship such as this. Against smaller targets, those missiles do a fair chunk of damage, and those smaller targets will form the core of what you want to be up against in the 125A. That's because the single size 1 shield generator really doesn't give you much protection at all. Against interceptor sized targets, or even some of the other lighter fighters, the 125A actually stacks up really well. It's nimble enough at SCM speeds to get nose on target and deliver the firepower offered by those 2 weapons, and the weapons are big enough to do some damage. The challenge for the 125A is when anything of a medium size or bigger comes along, because you really don't want to tangle with them. Although the 125A is nimble, it's not as nimble as an M50 for example, so you do end up painting a big target on your back that your size 1 shield generator isn't able to cover. But as long as you don't stray too far from your weight class, the 125A is a surprisingly capable fighter. Part 3. Handling and Visibility. Usually you might expect Origin ships to have excellent visibility. For the most part that holds true for the 125A, although the inclusion of a dark band all the way around the lower edge of the cockpit feels like a poor design decision. That said, you're left with the impression of having a bubble canopy, which is excellent, particularly for a fighter craft that tangles with some incredibly nimble opponents. Much like the 100i, the 125A can be a little sluggish compared to some of those opponents. The acceleration is fairly good, but braking is nowhere near as strong, and the vast majority of your momentum comes from those rear engines. That means that your 125A often drifts and can take a lot of work to reverse direction. Don't get me wrong, this is still more manoeuvrable than many other ships, but it handles like a much bigger ship than it is. Which is a shame, but does give more reason for the 100 series to coexist with the 300 series, I suppose. Planet side, those characteristics really come to life. With careful piloting, the 125A handles absolutely fine, but if you try to push too far, the 125A will not like it, nor will it always let you know what those limits are. This really rewards you for experience behind the wheel of the ship, which on the one hand is nice for a simulation type game, but perhaps not quite so appropriate for a starter ship. Some examples of this would be constantly overshooting landings, for example. That said, sticking to the SCM limiter largely avoids many of these problems, and with an SCM speed of 230 meters per second, the 125A is no slouch. Until we come to the quantum drive, and then the 125A is a slouch, but that's not an unusual verdict. Ordinarily, the recommendation here would be simply to upgrade the drive, but the fuel stores aren't huge, so perhaps the recommendation is instead to stay local? Part 4. Operating costs. Here, the 125A really redeems itself from much of the criticism levelled at it so far. Firstly, and unlike most other fighters, the 125A is a ship with a fully physicalised interior. That means you get a bed, cargo storage, and a little room to walk around, which opens up a lot of gameplay options. Firstly, you're most likely to earn your money undertaking combat contracts, such as bounty missions. The 125A does best when sticking to low or very low risk targets, as that single size 1 shield generator just can't repel firepower of any significant magnitude. But with those less risky contracts, the 125A does a fantastic job. Secondly, the internal space means you can undertake many of the box delivery type contracts, which are an interesting way to get out and about and explore places, which is a real plus for a starter ship. The 2 cargo units of storage do in theory offer the ability to make some cash by trading, although the reality is, for 2 SCU, it's really not worth it, unless you're just trading as you pass through to supplement your income on other missions. And even the inclusion of the bed as a sitting point for a crew member means you can actually ferry a friend along with you, or offer to space taxi somebody across the verse to make some money, as long as they don't need to get there quickly. And all of those money-making options are enhanced somewhat by just how cheap it is to repair and refuel the 125A. Supplemented by the onboard fuel scoop, you're likely to be spending well below 100 credits for refuel, which is a real plus for this starter ship. If you fire the missiles, you might expect costs to increase into the hundreds or low thousands, but will still be significantly less than your potential to earn. Part 5. The verdict. There's a lot that's good about the 125A. Firstly, the F-22 or F-35 type look and feel to it is a really nice touch, especially for aspiring combat pilots. The myriad options for sampling different gameplay loops is also a really important factor for a starter ship, and one of the reasons why the Avenger is so often recommended. And although the 125A is not quite as sleek as some of the bigger Origin options, it does still manage to retain the look and feel of Origin, which gives a slightly more premium environment for pilots with that preference. The 125A also has more physicalised cockpit switches than many other ships, which is interesting. Also, there's a warning indicator which just says "cool fail", which does leave you thinking whether it's commenting on your flying style. The 125A comes at a price of about 800,000 Alpha UEC or $60 when available on the pledge store. Subject to one massive drawback, which I'll get to, then depending on your preferences and style, both are actually fairly reasonable price points. This isn't a hugely capable ship, but it's incredibly versatile, which is important for a starter ship, as you'll likely be using it to build up your in-game funds to upgrade to something bigger. It also has a different feel to it than other starter ships, meaning it might appeal to some players but not to others. I personally quite like that about Star Citizen, where there are lots of options that might achieve a similar result but with a variety in style. You should not buy this ship if you're looking for a high capability ship. Although the 125A is versatile in that it can do many different things, it's fairly limited in each capability, and the single size 1 shield generator means you must pick your fights carefully. So what's that massive drawback I was talking about earlier? That would be the slightly larger but hugely more capable 300 series. Specifically, in this instance, the 325A, which comes with a heavier weapons loadout, stronger defensive capabilities, and only for a relatively modest price increase of a couple of 100,000 Alpha UEC or $10 to $20 or so. So that creates a very narrow little niche for the 125A, where you might consider it, but otherwise you might be better off going bigger. But do you agree? What do you think of the 125A? Let me know by sharing your thoughts in the comments. And if you've enjoyed the video, you might consider clicking the like button. You may also be interested in my review of the 300i. Outside of that, if you're looking for a group who plays Star Citizen regularly, I've included a link to my organisation in the video description. Thank you for watching.